All right. I'm going to call the meeting to order since it's 5 o'clock, and we will start with roll call.
Stu Boyd.
Here.
Amy Doran.
Here.
Pam Howard.
Here.
Dawn Kirk.
Here.
Barbara Cruz.
Here.
Alexandra Lessem. Here. And Nancy Rendell.
Here. Thank you, Laura Lee. And Stu, pledge of allegiance, please.
Oh, there.
There it is.
3D. Pledge allegiance to Dr. Schaefer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Stu. All right, we will begin with approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda for tonight's meeting? Hearing none, I will take a motion to adopt the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Dawn?
Second.
And Pam. First from Dawn, a second from Pam. Laura Lee, will you call the roll, please?
Stu Boyd.
Aye.
Amy Doran.
Aye.
Pam Howard.
Aye.
Dawn Kirk.
Aye.
Barbara Cruz.
Aye.
Alexandra Lessem.
Aye.
Nancy Rendell.
Aye.
Motion passes, so the agenda is approved. And we will move into the school presentation. So, Centennial.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Totally fine. Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board, Sarah Rasmussen, Executive Director of Elementary Schools, and I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Carmen Polka and her staff to do their school presentation this evening.
Hi, team.
Okay, all right. Thank you for being here at Centennial Elementary tonight. We appreciate you joining us in our type of a forum. I'm going to go ahead and let my staff introduce themselves.
I'm Kelly Blanks and I teach kindergarten here.
Peggy Hawkins, a fourth grade teacher. Rachel Kaufman, instructional coach and academic interventionist.
And Julie Norton, first grade teacher.
And again, Dr. Carmen Polka, principal here at Centennial. All right, our contents for our presentation tonight include our introduction to Centennial, and then we really want to focus on what critical thinking looks like in action in our classrooms, and then there's time for questions and discussion. So this is Centennial. This was our photo at the beginning of the year. Today is your day. We're proud to be Centennial Eagles, and we have an awesome community here. So our focus on critical thinking in action is congruent with the portrait of a graduate in Thompson School District, and we focus on that because critical thinking is in high global demand. Within, nope, this isn't me. Sorry.
So over the years, our staff has worked to learn and read about the elements of reasoning, which is how we take apart our thinking. We've learned the intellectual standards, which is how we make sure we have quality thinking, all as a goal to have intellectual traits, which is what a true critical thinker encompasses. And we are doing all of that through reading, writing, speaking, and listening, as well as other instructional practices and routines. This is a flow chart that we're using, or I'm sorry, a scope and sequence would be a better word. Dr. Carmen Polka created this scope and sequence for us, but then a team of us who participated in a book study over the summer tweaked it to fit each grade level the way that we like it right now anyway. And these are just some strategies that we're using to implement critical thinking in our classrooms. We have critical thinking read-alouds, we do critical writing, IC is a vocabulary strategy, we use close reading, and dyads and triads are mostly just ways that we use classroom discussion within our lessons. So when looking at John Hattie's work, his research on practices that influence our teaching and high effect, all of these strategies help us attain a 0.87 effect for our classrooms, which is it's a high number. This is a very specific document that gets into specifics of definitions and examples of each of the strategies that we're using in our classrooms.
So we do all of this to connect the role that the teacher plays and the role that I play in improving instructional practices. And so we know that teachers are working on that improvement and mastery of standards for students, problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, and overall student achievement, and that's represented in the literature. We also know that principals, we serve an important role alongside, I will say, with our instructional coach I have observations that I do, and then we also have, which we'll hear more about in a few minutes, walkthroughs, peer observations, feedback cycles, and so forth that are all aligned with that notion of how do we actually implement and improve instructional practices. So we're going to share some of those ways.
So one of the first instructional strategies that we've implemented school-wide is the critical read aloud, which is just really a student-friendly way to introduce the elements of reasoning, the intellectual standards, and the intellectual traits while incorporating them into literacy. So while a typical read aloud might just focus on like story elements or facts if it's a nonfiction text, a critical read aloud really takes students thinking much further and requires them to develop their own inferences about what they're reading, what the text says, while also using those intellectual standards to evaluate their inferences and the inferences of others. It's a really great way for kids to engage in good dialogue with each other, considering different perspectives, seeking clarity from each other, and just checking the accuracy of what they're reading and what they're hearing. So. These are some examples. This is one of our 5th grade teachers. It's a little hard to see, but I really love the middle one where she has students kind of doing their first thinking, their first assumptions and inferences about some of the characters. And then as they read and discuss more, they move on to that 3rd column where they've evaluated their thinking and refined it a little bit and add more. Here's one of our 4th grade teachers also using some of that critical thinking literature or vocabulary about inferring and using precise language and asking for clarity from their peers.
We're also using it in when we are doing our close reading through our foundational literacy, which is still using the same parts of thinking where we're doing inferences, where we're doing assumptions, points of view, what is our purpose, and base then going through, is it precise, is it logical, does it make sense, is it relevant, using all of that terminology. And it goes all the way through reading, writing, and speaking, because they're using all of those things when they are close reading. And the next slide is an example of one that I did in my classroom, and we were working on assumptions and based on a book from our ReadyGen series. And it doesn't say she was poo, it's really she was poor. Just wanted to clarify that.
Elementary school.
So,
Anything happens.
yeah. And this was all done in table groups, so academic circles where the kids are really carrying the discussion, and I'm just facilitating. And their assumptions were in this book that she was poor and that she was uneducated, but as they read through it, that was literal, just from the text, but when they discussed it, they could find evidence, and through talking, they found out that she really was educated. It was just what people were thinking. I could have easily told them that, but through them working as a table group and discussions and talking to each other, they came up with this on their own, and the sticky notes were what they were thinking and their evidence that would prove that those assumptions were either correct or the assumptions were incorrect. So continually using it based on our curriculum, but pulling out what our critical thinking, parts of thinking are in our character trait, or critical thinking traits.
Another framework that we've used is the IC model, which stands for Illustrate, State, Elaborate, and Exemplify. This is a powerful tool to help students deepen their conceptual understanding and understanding of vocabulary. The next slide shows a weird picture of me, just ignore that. I don't know what I was about to say there, but with our first graders, we kept seeing in our new math curriculum this idea of convince me. And we really needed some clarity around that with first grade, like what does that mean? So using the IC model, we were able to state that definition, but then elaborate in our own words what that really means, and then exemplify it, give an example. And so once we were done with this, we were able to use the vertical non-permanent surfaces in groups that we've talked about with our All Learners Network. And students used drawings and math models and words and equations to really convince me, their teacher, but also their peers and themselves that their answers in math were actually accurate.
And this leads to our critical writing. It involves those same things, the same critical thinking traits and elements of it. Is it precise? Is it relevant? Does the text evidence make sense with what we're trying to find? And it works, when you see the slide, these kids are working in groups. They've already written their writing for that day, and they're talking in groups about, was there evidence that they found? Was it precise? Was it logical? Was it really to the purpose of what they were asking? And it's amazing from my classroom that I've seen, these kids are using that language all the time. It's just not, oh, I look at a chart, they can physically and orally use that language. Could you give me more clarity, or I'm not understanding that, could you be more precise? I don't think that's very logical because it didn't meet the purpose. They are using those words and understanding what that means. And once again, it's all in table groups and groups, so they are leading the discussion, we're just facilitating. So it's wonderful to hear what they are coming up with and hear their talking versus our talking.
And then, of course, there's other ways to bring in critical thinking that are tied to our lives in general. So other instructional practices include, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, but this third grade teacher used a multimedia experience with her students, and her focus was the idea of clarity and how clarity can help us with our thinking and our decision making. So these students watched a video, and then they were still, as you can see, writing, speaking, and listening, and they were speaking and listening in a very highly engaged manner because this particular multimedia experience was very interesting to them, and there was a lot of debating going on. So it was still a great example of them using their critical thinking skills and discussing and just coming to an overall consensus about this experience of clarity. And what this third grade teacher found was that it very much tied to their lives socially. And so it's also such an important skill for them to have in a social and emotional way. Like, we experience these things all the time and have to be able to get through them.
So with all the critical thinking strategies that have been shared this evening, the ability to just work together and work through critical thinking together has just made the staff great. So you can go to the next slide. In order to continue our teamwork and build that collective efficacy, we've been doing walkthroughs, and we started this 3 years ago during our PLCs. And we first started just working just to go into classrooms and have teachers comfortable with their peers coming in and learning from each other. And we would celebrate each other by leaving notes and seeing just all the excitement of the learning and what students were doing. And then we've kind of grown where our staff was voting and saying, we want to continue this. So we've kind of been building on it each year, which has been really exciting. And then, so this year we're going in and we're really focusing on that critical thinking, and it's teachers are finding the power in it as far as watching their own teammates and people in the building and all the great things that are happening. when we're done with our PLCs and our walkthroughs, then on Wednesdays we meet together, and so you can see lots of pictures there that just happened last week. This is a great opportunity for questions to be answered, and ways to celebrate each other, as well as just to continue that learning process in our building. So it's been a great addition to our Wednesday PDs.
So what this means for Centennial is that we maintain a commitment to critical thinking as our core of learning. We value critical thinking, we protect critical thinking, we have defined it, we can describe it, and we prioritize it. And the future of the world is in our classrooms, and this sign is actually on one of our walls. And that's truly the task that we have at hand, that we feel that we need to rise up to, and we need to create our students, we need to give them the opportunities to be able to go out into the world with quality reasoning. So we didn't know if there were how we do this.
So we can ask some questions. If we have it. So does anybody have any questions? And I'll start over with Dawn, and we'll just buzz around like usual.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I do. Carmen, is this a focus of your building? Is critical thinking a focus? Is it part of the district expectation, the district curriculum? I'll stop asking the question now. You answer.
Sure. So in our district, as mentioned prior, we have our Portrait of a Graduate. So within the Portrait of a Graduate, and that came about many years ago, that we want to embody these things within our students. Within the actual defined curriculum as approved by board policy, this is not a curriculum. This is like anything else where it's an instructional strategy. So for example, we have math coming in with All Learners Network, and what are they doing? They're helping to level up our practices as we teach math, and a lot of it actually aligns with the work that we're doing. So critical thinking is not something that is a curriculum, it's an instructional, we use it as an instructional strategy, but there is meat to it, because you cannot expect a teacher to go in and do the work that they're doing without understanding what critical thinking actually is.
I have a follow-up.
Did I answer you?
You did.
Okay.
You did. And my follow-up question is probably for Sarah. Where? Sarah, back there. You can just stay there. I'm sure you can hear me. I'll use my teacher voice. Is what's happening at Centennial typical for all of the elementary schools in the district? Do you understand what my question is? So if I were to go to Namakwa or Big T or whatever in regard to the approach, and I appreciate the fact that you pointed out it's not a curriculum, it's a strategy, would I see the same kinds of things being employed?
So one of the things that Carmen had mentioned was that through All Learners Network, through the math work that we're doing, we're actually really starting to engage in more deeply exploring what critical thinking looks like using our new curriculum materials. So we're really digging into that and doing that throughout the entire district. As far as the work that Carmen specifically is doing with her staff, they really are truly focusing on the skill of critical thinking. They have narrowed that down. And so that's not necessarily a identified strategy that each building is doing, yet it is in our Portrait of a Graduate. And we do expect students to critically think about what they're reading, how they're solving math problems, how they're talking about whatever content it is. So they're definitely doing a deeper dive into that here, but there are components of that throughout our schools.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
I really enjoyed reading through the presentation, but then listening to each of you, like, use your own words to take it further really helped bring it home for me, if you will. And so, I'm sure it's no surprise, I've always been a proponent of critical thinking. Dr. Banks and I used to talk about, and he has a little booklet that we would always go through. But I would also say that when you talked about that this is an instructional strategy, I think what you're sharing with the kids goes beyond that. You're giving them a life strategy of as you go and you get older, you know, and there's all these different things coming at you maybe at work, you know, how do you take it apart and look at what's real, what's valid, what's, you know, all of that. So I think it's a great approach, and I love this presentation.
Amy?
I have no questions, but thank you.
Alexandra?
I have a question, sort of, I guess somewhat related to Steve. So is this, like, do you have, like, specific, like, this is our critical thinking time? Or is it used with specific subjects, like just with, like, reading and writing? Or is it sort of infused throughout everything?
It's
Yeah.
different.
It's on the playground.
EAS systems, yeah.
It's everywhere.
Well, how is it, what's on the playground?
Okay, I'll give a kindergarten example. Mrs. Lang, someone spit on me. Really? Can you tell me more about that? Like, how do you know? What? Well, turns out they weren't spitting. They were in their bubble space, we call it, talking really closely. So it's getting them to really think about the information they have, what are, like, closely examining, closely talking through problems. So it's the tiniest problems that come up on the playground that really weren't a problem. It's just a misunderstanding. It's like a lack of communication. So it's just helping them to ask a lot of questions, get a lot of information. I had a kindergartner last year who would say to me, Mrs. Blanks, you don't have all of the information yet, you know, upon making a decision. So it's everywhere.
That's awesome, thank you.
No questions, just thanks for all you do. This is amazing work, so we really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you. It just can't help but think it has to be infused in everything. You can't isolate thinking. And you can't isolate getting the kids to talk about it. So they have to have that opportunity. Once they have it there, it just pops out as on the playground. So thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys are free to go. You don't have to stick around. Yes, and thank you very much. We really, and it was fun to visit with those people that were there ahead of time, so thank you. All right. We'll move into the discussion items for our upcoming board meeting, which is in 2 weeks. So again, we'll do the same kind of thing as after they've had their opportunity to share the topic that they're sharing with us, then we'll do our round robin questions. We'll just kind of stagger the start. So our first one, S4.1, which is the first reading of policy LC, which is Relations with Education Research Agencies, and the exhibit of LC-E, Research Philosophy. And it's a lot of words, but we'll turn it over. Nice to see you, Audrey. Turn it over to Melissa.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, and Dr. Schaefer. Tonight I present to you just an update on our policy LCE-E, just the exhibit part of this policy. And you can click ahead, Laura, thank you. Connecting it with Strive 2025, that our assets are properly inventoried, maintained, and used appropriately without waste, and providing transparency in use of our resources. So LCE-E, our research philosophy, it is a kind of a canned policy, an exhibit around if somebody wants to apply to do external or internal research in Thompson School District. The reason why I'm suggesting these revisions is because it is out of date. 2016 was the last time it was updated, and since then a couple of positions have been named in there that don't any longer exist. So I've replaced that with superintendent or designee, which would be the chief academic officer in terms of sending the form into a certain department or person. It had named a position that no longer exists before that. Also, to be able to have some flexible language, it also mentioned the strategic plan from many years ago in that policy, and so to be able to say with the current district strategic plan allows for the policy to be used at different times. So those are the revisions in short. Do you have any questions?
Stu, do you have a question? Nancy?
I had never, wasn't aware of this. So my only question was like, what kind of external groups want to do research here? And, you know, like
Great
where-
question. I have one right now that you actually all met last spring, and it is the animal assisted.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh,
And
stuff, okay.
yeah, that would be a great example of one. I do approve the research requests, and I kind of have some autonomy with that, and those who I work with that are, you know, whenever that form comes in, I see who might be related to the particular request and talk it through. We don't really do external research unless it is something like that seems like it's gonna have a double benefit, you know, for us and for them, and it's, you know, a really cool thing that we could experience as a district. But we really prioritize our internal, our own people who are doing their master's degrees and their doctorates, and they would like to take a problem of practice and research it here in Thompson School District. It goes along with them bettering their own positions and their own jobs. So I do like to prioritize those requests, and the only outside one that we have right now is the animal assisted intervention.
Okay.
Mhm.
Amy?
No questions, thanks for bringing us up to the current time.
Yeah.
Alexandra?
So it's not a question per se, but in the document, there's one place where the things didn't get updated.
Oh, okay. And what was
Which-
submitted to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
On page 3 at the bottom, after H, where it says note that you need to submit an electronic version of the complete application to Director of Assessment and mail a copy to Thompson School District.
Thank you very much. That will be changed for next meeting.
Okay.
Good eye.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep. I didn't see that either. Ann?
No questions, thanks.
No. I don't, the only one is, I'm glad that it's kind of all connected to our strike plan. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, stay put.
I'm staying.
4.2 is the District Advisory and Accountability Committee for the DAC membership for 2023 through 2025 school year. So I assume it is for the 2 years, this
Yes,
year
it
and
is.
next year? Okay.
Yes.
School year's, the update on it. So Melissa.
All right, thank you, Madam President. So this is a routine presentation here with our voting membership, so our connection to STRIVE 2025. Make sure all stakeholders are engaged effectively in two-way communication. That's a big priority with DAC. Increase alignment of resources to reflect the needs in our strategic plan and to have transparency in the use of district resources. So I've gone over this with you as well. This is a statutorily required committee that has some membership requirements as well, but totally not limited to these list of things that we do work on. The District Unified Improvement Plan, district priorities, family engagement, use of assessments, review of charter applications, and this year we will have a charter renewal. So we'll be hearing from our Executive Director of Loveland Classical at our next DAC meeting as an example of that. So there's lots of input gathered here and a great stakeholder group. These are the required members. So 3 parents of students enrolled in the district, 1 teacher employed by the district. These are all at minimum. 1 school administrator employed by the district, and at least 1 person involved in business in the community within the district boundaries. So we've had some pretty good attendance. It is a hybrid meeting. So we request that you approve this list of the voting membership. It is a 2-year commitment. We did reach out to them and make sure that they knew that we expected attendance so that we could have a quorum when we do vote. And they had some time to make sure that they were committed, and this is the list that we've got. Okay, so.
Nancy, any questions?
No, the only comment, I love the way the meetings are being run, just the atmosphere. They're more engaging, and Jesse, what he's been bringing has been great. I love all the different exercises he has us go through. So
Thank you.
It just feels more interactive.
Thanks.
Amy?
And I'll tag onto that, how you facilitate the hybrid part of that, because even being at home, I mean, you still go into your own breakout group and, you know, you have your own Jamboard and all of that. And so it is a very accessible and inclusive way to participate. So, and I forget who runs all of the tech, like when we're at home. Is it Chris? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so
Another jam.
it's just, it's great to, so I hope that
Well, thank you.
that you guys keep doing, that keeps, but.
Alexandra? Pam? The only question I have is, of the membership, how many schools are actually represented? And I'd like, I don't know if you can do that or not, if you can put a school on,
I can update that for
you know,
you
I
and
just
bring it
feel
back.
like it would
Make
be
sure we
nice
have
to
the-
know
Yeah.
what schools are included in the DAC group.
Good point.
And what schools you need to focus on.
I can do that for you.
Thank you. Dawn, I forgot to come back to you last time too, I'm sorry. When we, yeah, it's okay.
Worked out fine.
Yeah, it did. Obviously, you would've,
What
you
did we
would've
just talk
stopped
about?
me
So
if
that's
I.
fine. So similarly, I know in the past, we've really tried to make sure that we have representation from across the district, and I know that's tough, right? I mean, you can offer it, and you don't know, it's really tough to keep it balanced. But at one point, it was asking people to participate on DAC or SAC, or both. Are we still doing that?
We have what we call a DAC-SAC combo meeting, so it does count towards one of their SAC meetings, and we kind of pack the house at those. Those are really, really nice. So it's an opportunity for them to get a taste of both. There are people who do both because they would like to, but from what I know and talking to the members, they're kind of beyond one or the other. We also have taken it to the schools this time as well, so we're gonna be at Peakview for our next DAC meeting, and gonna, kind of like this, where we're kind of having some of our meetings around the district so that we can make it a little bit more convenient for people to possibly attend both if they're interested.
I would really like us to have more representation from across the district. I understand how tough that is, right? And I'm saying that from experience. And also when we end up with when we don't have some balance in middle school, high school, elementary, early childhood, different perspectives, different voices, and even different parts of our big district that has some geographic things to it, we lose that. And I know the last time we did have schools on there, and the last time it was really concentrated in one school instead of across. And I want to make sure that I know that's, again, we are already offering, but I think we need to really actually like insist on it, because we can't have any one group be all right, we on the board have to be geographically diverse. I think DAC is serving a very similar function. A lot of our other committees are like that as well. And DAC has a ton of oversight. I mean, they've got the biggest umbrella, truly. So, I would love to make sure that we are not having over and under representation.
I appreciate that feedback, thank you.
Stu? No? Okay. So we'll see this for approval.
Yeah, I'll make
Okay.
those revisions for next time.
Perfect, thank you. All right, 4.3 is the Curriculum Instruction Council course approval, CIC. Hello there, Tiffany.
Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board, I am Tiffany Miller, Director of Curriculum and Learning Design, and excited to be here tonight. So we're going to talk through a new course that we have for our students. So obviously hitting all 4 areas of Strive 2025 for this group of students in our DLI program. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our course approval process. So here listed, we have all of the ways that we ask teachers to submit a new course. They do a video, they give us standards, how it supports our students. We ask if there are any implications for FTE. We go through how the course is going to be scored and ask a ton of questions of really what's in the best interest of our kids. So DLI program is at 2 of our elementaries, 2 of our middles, and now these students have been in the DLI program for 10 years, which is super exciting. I know. So as we look and review the courses, this is our district review team. We want to make sure that anybody who submits a course, they have a representative from a curriculum area, and then of course Andy Chrisman's on the team, and then we've got Thea Robeson. If we were adding a course to an elementary or K-8, Sarah would obviously be included as well. So like I said, our students in DLI are now hitting our 2 high schools, and so in order to continue this progression, Loveland High and Thompson Valley High School are 2 high schools that are going to host our DLI program. So Tony Tyson, who most of you all know very well, is our world language specialist in our department and is putting forward this course, which would be that next progression. And so when we look at that continuum, from Truscott and Cottonwood to Irwin and Bill Reed, these students will now have an advanced Spanish 4 pending your approval in order to hopefully meet that seal of biliteracy as they get into high school. You will see us again here next year doing an advanced 5 because we really need to meet that progression, but it's really exciting to see these students progress into high school.
All right, Amy, question?
No, it just time goes by fast.
It does.
I cannot believe that it's awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Alexandra?
I have 2 questions. One, so with this theoretically progress to level, what's that, 4, 5, 7? Is there a level 7 or does it end at some point?
It ends, I believe, their junior year. They take the seal of biliteracy, which is that test they take, and then our big goal would be that they will have the concurrent enrollment and earn high school credit as well. College. They'll earn high school credit for sure. The college credit, yes.
Okay, very cool. And then my other question is, if there are students who were not part of the bilingual program but are advanced in Spanish, would they be able to take this course as well?
It's a great question. And so what we would do is give them the Apple test to see where their proficiency is with the language, and then we would either say this is a great program for them or continue on the regular track. The biggest thing is this level of proficiency. When you think about 9 years of the literacy component and the speaking, most of our native speakers are really strong speaking. They don't all have that literacy component where they can read and write in both languages. So the Apple test would be given as well. So we do that currently right now. We've got some kids at Truscott, I believe. We allowed a student who came from a different state to take the proficiency test, and we granted that approval to join the program.
Thank you.
Do we still work with CU or other colleges for college credit? Which ones do we work with?
We work with several.
Oh, we work with Front Range Community College.
Front Range, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so old and used to do CU. So
Yeah.
my kids are doing it, so, okay.
And then especially with our dual language program, we partner a lot with Utah.
Oh, okay.
I'm guessing
And
that's
Ames.
what- And Ames.
And Ames, okay, awesome. Great collaboration, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Don? No? Stu?
Yeah. Students who aren't part of the dual immersion program, when can they enter the world language program?
Middle school.
In middle school,
Mm-hmm.
all right. Can you talk to me a little bit about what, and my question is not dual immersion at this point. Can you tell me how the introductory classes at the middle school for students who are not dual immersion compare to where the dual immersion students are perhaps at that same age?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that written and speaking component, and so when we look at can they read in Spanish, traditionally right now our DLI program is through Spanish, so I'll just compare Spanish for you.
Okay.
If you are a 6th grader and you are just entering into the world language program, you're just learning those
Right.
basic pieces. Whereas if I'm a 6th grader and I've been through now, what would that be, 7 years of DLI, I'm able to speak, write, read all of those pieces in Spanish. So there's a very large difference if you are a 6th grader who's been in DLI program for those years before compared to somebody just entering in world language. Does that make
Will
sense?
those two groups ever intersect? Will the kids who begin in 6th grade because they didn't have the opportunity for dual language immersion, will they ever catch up with the other students and be at the same point? No.
Currently not right now.
So do we actually have two different tracks then? As students proceed through middle school and then particularly on into high school, there's the students who have dual immersion are ahead because of the
Yeah, and I wouldn't call them tracks, I would call them programs.
Okay.
So, yeah, students who've been exposed to the program since kindergarten are gonna outperform those that start
Of
in
course.
6th grade. And so, yeah, they're both taking Spanish courses.
Of course.
We would have students at the middle level, as they matriculate into high school, would be eligible for concurrent enrollment, such as advanced placement. But in terms of the fluency that Tiffany spoke about, not through our program would they ever catch up.
Do the high school still offer Spanish 3, 4, and 5, all right? And the students in those classes would be the students who start in 6th grade? Or might they be a mix of the two different programs?
They would not be in the same program, no.
Ever?
Correct.
Okay.
You might have a senior in a Spanish 4 class that looks similar to this one, but their level of proficiency still looks very different, which is why this one is specific for a program of DLI.
Okay. And my last question then is, for students who don't begin until 6th grade or later, is it possible for them to achieve the seal of biliteracy? It is still
Yeah,
possible for them to
absolutely.
do that? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks.
Nancy?
No questions, I just think dual language is great.
All right, thank you. And we'll see this again, correct? For approval? Yes. Yeah. All right. 4.4, Joint Insurance Committee Renewal Update. Hello.
Hello.
And of course, Dr. Severson, sorry.
Hi. Just here to support Dorothy.
Excellent. Good evening, Dr. Schaefer, Madam President, members of the board. I'm Dorothy Barnhart, District's Benefits and Risk Manager, joined by Dr. Bill Severs. who is our
Chief Human
wonderful-
Resources Officer,
Yes.
thank you.
Disconnects with Strive 2025 in focus area human talent and focus area for stewardship of resources. And our purpose is to provide you with the recommendation from our wonderful JIC regarding the utilization of CEBT unrestricted surplus dividend. So CEBT Board of Trustees, they're governed by a group of individuals, much like yourself, declare dividends when they reach a surplus of funds as a nonprofit entity. They don't hang on to money, they don't have to. They return it to the participating members. Over the past couple years, we've had very favorable claims experience in CEBT. Part of that has been COVID, part of that's been contracting that exists with those health providers. And so the board, after they determined we have enough in our rainy day fund, said we're gonna return this to our members. Our district received $1,076,890 for our portion of the dividend. This check has actually been received and sitting in the bank waiting for our next steps. This was based on the number of enrollees that we had on June 30th of 2022, including our retirees, individuals who are on the leave, or our COBRA participants. After thorough discussion at JIC, the recommendation is that we return this to our membership. based on the individuals who are on the insurance billing as of that June 30th date of 2022. They're still employed or still contributing in the direct pay system. We would return that to them. We desire that this be cost neutral to the district, so we have withheld the appropriate portion for Medicare and para, and with a little bit for other administrative costs that's associated with an estimated payout amount of $435 per participant before the state and federal taxes are withheld. So that would adjust that accordingly for each participant.
All right. Questions? Alexandra? Pam? No. I don't have any. Don? Stu? Nancy? Amy? No.
You
It's unanimous, no question.
The key words were cost neutral.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all you have to say.
Yeah.
We're like, that's good.
Yeah.
You got this? Great.
4.5 calendar recommendations for 2023-24 and 2024-2025. I hope I did that right.
25, 26.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't say it right, did I?
No.
320.
Madam President, School Board, Dr. Schaefer, Bill Sievers, Chief Human Resources Officer. I'm accompanied by these three wonderful people that will introduce themselves.
Janet Kincaid, 3rd grade, Berthoud Elementary.
Andy Crispin, music teacher, Thompson School District.
Tom Bashir, Director of Human Resources.
So the presentation will cover Strike 2025, ensure learning environments support a positive culture and climate. Has to do with the school calendar, which is ultimately supporting the school climate. So the topics is we'll talk briefly about the policy. We'll review the work from the calendar committee and discuss the two calendars that are moving forward, 24-25 calendar and 25-26. And we'll also discuss the survey information that we gave out to the community and the feedback that we got before we made any final decisions of the recommendation moving to the board. So the board policy is there. It just gives you an idea that the board is very responsible for school calendars having to do with instructional time. So I'm not going to read all of that. And then we had met for 2 months. So first, we want to appreciate everybody that was on calendar committee. So if you're on calendar committee, you can just raise your hand like this. You can look around.
Well, look at all those people.
And so Anne's back there, a great part of calendar committee, and she chose not to present tonight. But she said she'll come up for any questions that the board may have. So there's a list of the members, the continued members, and thanks to all the members at our home that are watching this. Just the amount of work and the conversations and the deep conversation. And Dr. Lesson was part of the calendar committee as well, and she definitely had a great time going through the process.
I did enjoy it.
One of the first things that we talked about were the values that the calendar committee had. And so the things that rose to the top were we wanted consistency and we wanted predictability for our families and our staff. We wanted to honor feedback from all, and Tom's going to talk more about the survey and the results of that. We wanted to look for uninterrupted time, so less broken weeks, so that we had the kiddos in the seats as much as possible. And then one of the things that came about was also the transition day, and this last year it started on a Monday and made for a really long week for the youngest of the students. So we wanted to look at that first week and including the transition, but making it a partial week for those kindergarten students as well as 6th and 9th graders.
All right, so the committee decided to gather some input from the community. So we put out a survey to all community stakeholders, community staff, students. We had 1,818 respondents for the survey. And some of the bullet points that we pulled from the survey that had some critical highlights are on these next two slides. So the first one was out of the over 1,800 respondents, we had 74% that either agreed, strongly agreed, or answered neutrally that they were satisfied with the current calendar that we are in for the 23-24 school year. We had 93%, again, that strongly agreed, or neutral, that they were satisfied with the 5-day Thanksgiving break for students. And so that's something that's been in the calendar here for a few years. 95% also strongly agreed, or were neutral, satisfied with the ending of first semester being before the winter break. So there was a handful of questions that we put in, and those were some really high numbers that we had for a few of those questions.
And so we also took a look at some neighboring districts' calendars for the coming years and tried to get a handle on when different spring breaks were, especially when different winter breaks were. Discussion particularly focused around Front Range's spring break, if we can, because we had an interest in making sure our high school students who are concurrently enrolled would have a free and clear spring break. But we also talked about CSU and other school districts as well. Needed to make sure that because we have in our negotiated agreement that there's 170 contact days and 185 contract days, that we did it that way. We actually were able to more closely balance the two semesters. We were at 80 and 90. These two that are in front of you are at 83 and 87. Still pretty close to balanced in many of our opinions, because second semester we have a number of days that are lost to standardized testing. So it's actually a lot closer than even that looks in a lot of ways. Transition day for K-6-9 is on Wednesday, August 14th, and then everyone comes back on the Thursday.
And then the two topics that Stu had talked about at the last presentation was making sure that we had talked about these two items. And basically the Labor Day discussion, we had deep discussion about that. And when you're building a calendar, the philosophy behind it is what's best for the students. And the thing that we thought best for the students was, like losing the 3 weeks of instruction, because the testing window doesn't change. Like the testing window is going to stay the same. So it'd be extremely difficult for us to say, well, we believe that kids should lose 3 weeks of instruction before the testing window. So we kind of stopped conversation there. And then the second thing that we talked about is the 4-day school week. And the districts that have moved to a 4-day school week, it was a discussion with all stakeholders. So for us to try to figure out what that's going to look like in an 8-week period, I think it would not do it the justice that it needs. Because if you don't get feedback from the community, because it's going to impact the community the most. So what we're recommending is to really put a task force together to have these deeper discussions. Like for example, when Brighton went to their 4-day work week, we continue to have conversations with that district because part of HR, and they really did a lot of work behind that. The reason why they're moving that direction. So for us, we thought it'd be great that if we really want to look at the calendar in a different way, we definitely need different stakeholders coming in and giving an opinion of what a school calendar can look like, and really start looking at other districts that have 4-day work weeks. It's the same thing when we presented to the board about changing the bell times from elementary and secondary. We really reached out to the two districts. It was Greeley and Cherry Creek were the two districts that started that movement, and then we did work with them to see, okay, so what did this look like? How does it impact the school? How did that impact the departments? So the point that we're trying to make is, for a deeper discussion, like we need more time. And like I said, Ann in the back would like to answer the questions. If she's still here.
Did I start?
Is the draft calendar attached to the?
Yeah.
So you have, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Did I start with you last time?
You did, so it's Amy's turn. It's Amy's turn.
No, we're going this way.
Oh, sorry. It's Pam's
Yeah,
turn.
that really confused me now.
Sorry.
Pam. Yeah, a lot of questions about a 4-day work week, because
teaching week. I felt that almost all of the districts that have gone that direction were rural districts that had trouble with busing and all those sorts of things. Are there any districts like us that have done the 4-day? Have gone to the 4-day?
Brighton.
So Brighton,
Just the
yeah.
one, right?
Greeley.
Yeah.
Greeley's 4-day.
Well,
60, right?
Yeah.
Pueblo 60.
okay. Greeley's 4-day?
I don't think so.
Some are. I know kids who come to my clinic on Mondays because they don't have school on Mondays. I wonder if it's
There's other wells.
There's a ton of Maybe it's Evans. Maybe it's Evans.
Okay,
But anyhow, it's a well.
So I guess I don't know, I'll just be honest, I don't know if it's really worth getting together a task force to dive into this. Like I just have never heard of the benefits. Usually that's a dire situation. You have to move to a 48-day work week because all these things are happening and there's, not enough funding and you're trying to save
Right.
utilities and busing and all that. And I just don't know if it's worth a lot of effort and time right now. It's just my personal opinion.
Well, it's a great opinion because it's the will of the board. Like if the board has an interest to move that forward, yeah. If the board has an interest, like going in that direction
Right, no,
of,
obviously.
yeah.
Obviously, I won't be part of that decision, but that's just, I have to give my 2 cents
You can be a
now.
community member on calendar committee, on the task force, so
You're a
thank you.
community member. What's the pay for that? How
It's
about
the same
working
pay,
equal?
it's the same pay right now.
Actually, it doubles. I was gonna say, because I have so much
Yes.
experience.
You get a certificate,
Yeah.
right? Like Alexander and I enjoyed the certificate.
Wow.
Yeah. We can give you a coupon.
Okay, I'm sort of leaning in agreement with Pam's discussion on that field, but I'll go over to Dawn.
Well, we've made it a triple now because that is what I wrote down. Because my understanding is that it's always been about budget.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if there are benefits for a district our size and not in the position where we're having to do it because we're making cuts. And I guess I'd like to have the answer to what those benefits might be before we pull a bunch of people together on that. I think there's other things related to the calendar that might be, bigger bites to take off. If we were gonna do a task force, then it might be like totally rethinking the calendar. Because
Right.
we have been asked about that in a way that you answered for now, that I feel like is gonna keep coming up. And so that we may need to have a task force for calendar that's broader than just the 4-day work week. That's what I'm wondering.
It is, like the bigger question is about instructional time too. Like we currently have 170 days and one time we had less days and other times we had more days with the calendar. So for us, when we look at the calendar thinking, well, it's more than just the 4 days. It's really about instructional time and what can we do different? And then it's really looking at the results that we have now. Okay, so are we satisfied with the results? Can the calendar reflect some changes we may need? So it's a bigger conversation, I'd say, especially about instructional time. And just to see where the board's at with their passion and their vision of what they would like to see in the calendar. But as we said, there are restrictions. Putting the calendar together, like 170 days is what continued, 185 days for teacher days. So it's a bigger conversation of, okay, so what do you think we need for the future?
Stu?
I wanted to visit with you for just a minute about a topic we haven't talked about yet tonight related to the calendar. A district parent approached me, found out I was a board member, and said, I really want to talk to you about the late start Wednesdays. And he had very strong opinions. He told me that he had talked with a number of other parents who shared his opinions. But since I didn't talk to them, I'm going to tell you what he told me. He said that it created problems for the family. It was difficult with regarding childcare. And he said that he had filled out the district survey, the district calendar survey, that he had registered his disapproval of this, and then again, that other parents had done this as well. I'm kind of curious as to whether the calendar committee did talk about some of the feedback that you may have gotten from disgruntled people.
So it wasn't part of calendar committee because it wasn't the purpose of our conversation.
Okay.
Because it's not the power of the calendar committee to change that.
Okay.
Right, it's a deeper conversation with negotiations because it's part of the contract. So the history behind that is at one time when we had early release, right? Like it was great. And then the district went away from that, like the will of the board was to move away from that.
Right.
And I think within the 3-year time span that it went away, there were a lot of problems that happened, right? Staffs felt like they didn't have enough collaboration time for professional development because basically they start school and then they end school and there's really no collaboration as a whole school because you don't have designated time. Because the big thing is it's time. Like there's always an issue with the time. Like teachers aren't having enough time, principals aren't having enough time with their staff, principals aren't having enough time with professional development, the district's not having enough time for professional development, and we did build in the 5 PD days, which is great, but that doesn't help when PD days are 2 days here, 1 day here, and the next couple of months you have another day, and then in April or May you might have another day in the past calendars. So the time lapse was extremely difficult for buildings because they weren't coming together.
I would add to that in the interval between when we had early release and late start, we tried to control for that by providing opportunities, but what that ended up meaning is we had a few years where we had as many as 17 partial weeks to allow for a day for this collaboration or a day for that collaboration. Dr. Sievers is fond of saying that every solution creates another problem. And so I'm not saying there aren't creative solutions that we couldn't look at, but it wasn't what we were looking at in this committee at this time.
Did the calendar survey actually have a question related to late start?
It did.
No.
No.
That's very interesting because he left me with the impression that this was his opportunity to register his disapproval of this.
Many people did.
Well, it's comments.
Well, how did they do that if it wasn't part of the
Because one of the questions was,
I see.
So do you have any feedback for the calendar committee?
I understand.
And the 54 pages that we got, we looked through it.
Okay.
But that wasn't a theme of it, right? Well, like it's more
Right.
of an
I
outlier.
understand.
Like if there's 1 or 2 people talking about, like we consider that an outlier instead of a theme.
So if he contacts me again, and I think he might, because he was really riled up about this, what do I tell him as a board member?
You can tell them to contact Andy Chrisman or contact Andy Chrisman or myself.
All right.
Like we would love to talk about the history and really listen to what the feedback is.
Sure.
Right, and that's great feedback for the future. You know, moving into negotiations too, it could be a critical or a related issue too.
I want to honor his passion. I want to honor his feelings about this. So that's what I will tell him if he contacts me again. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Let me finish this.
Yeah, I just want to come back to Stu.
I was really surprised the calendar didn't really change a whole lot, given, the big brouhaha we've all felt, heard, seen. But it makes sense. I also, on the 4-day week, I'm of the mindset that we almost need to do a task force just so that we understand what are the pros and cons, because my neighbor, who's a teacher in Greeley, they went to a 4-day work week, and I was expecting him to tell me how horrible it was for the kids and this and that, but that's not what he said. He said it was actually positive. It was actually a good thing. So I was surprised to hear that. And then even as I'm listening to the conversation, like professional development, like even I don't think she's here, the 4th grade teacher in the staff meeting, is that if we went to a 4-day instructional And Friday was always, could help fulfill the rest of the contract days, but that's what the days that was made available for collaboration and professional development or just own individual time. I've got this project I've been wanting to work on, I haven't had time. Then we see less impact on the students. So that's why I'm inclined to say that a task force, at the very least, just to do our due diligence, figure out is it a good idea, yes or no. And
What ties in the conversation about instructional time?
Yeah.
So is the board willing to kind of entertain the idea for teachers to lose instructional time with kids?
No. Right. So, that's my take on the 4-day, and again, I know that we're still gonna have to figure out in August, what do we do when we have a scorcher day?
Right.
So.
Amy?
Curious, do you know how many surveys you sent out?
To the whole community.
Yeah. So it was one in the whole community.
So one
and
per.
1,800.
1,800 came back, 18.
Yeah.
So there's 15,000 kids. So.
And they're, anybody tied to them in the system.
Okay.
The point is, it's a small percentage coming back,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's a little more than 10%, I
Right.
want to say, like 10 to 15%.
Okay, thank you.
And Alexander?
It's not statistically significant.
Yeah.
It could not be used in a research study.
Correct.
So I don't have a question, I have a couple of things to say based on my experience and from what you guys were talking about. So as far as the 4-day work week, the school week, a lot of where that came from was so we asked maybe 5-ish questions or something like that, and then there was a place for comments, for people to put comments. And the two, overwhelming, the highest quantity of comments were related to the start date, and number 2 was a 4-day week, which had been that was not a question, it was not asked, it was not anything, but it was something that people brought up probably, I didn't count, probably a few hundred of the 1,800 mentioned looking at a 4-day week. Most were interested in it. There were a couple who said, please do not do a 4-day week, but the vast majority were interested in looking at a 4-day week. And so that was sort of that part. And then also, as relates to the Wednesday, there were also there were a few comments about the Wednesday. There were also a few comments about start and finish times in general. And I think a lot of that has to do with people were thinking, and there were questions about certain what time sports activities are scheduled and stuff like that. Whereas the calendar committee doesn't look at any of that stuff. The calendar committee is just the base calendar, and then schools do with it what they will, and the start times and the end times and stuff like that are something totally separate. And so we definitely looked at that, and we talked about the Wednesday thing for sure. But it's not the purview of the calendar committee to do anything about that, as Dr. Sievers alluded to. And then also as relates to the Labor Day, the starting after Labor Day thing, we also did definitely talk about that a lot. And as relates to the instructional time before the state assessments was important. Also, as you saw, 95% of the respondents wanted the first semester to end before Christmas break. And if you start 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, that's not possible. And so those two things inherently conflict. And so we had to figure out what was the best way to do with that. And then related to the task force idea, there were sort of at the end of the session, there were sort of a lot of ideas that kind of were still sort of percolating that weren't things that we could deal with. As far with the 4-day week was one of those, the totally blowing things up and doing something radically different as far as start and end times and stuff like that was one of those. We had a good discussion about how the professional development days are distributed throughout the year, and whether there would be benefits in distributing them differently or having 2 together, so that the teachers could do the learning on day number 1 and then do implementation practice on day number 2, to make it that. But we didn't feel like those were things that we could do without coordinating with the professional development group. And so I think that was where the idea of sort of having a sort of more general like calendar task force or committee or whatever to look at it during a year where we're not actually making a calendar, but to look at some of these bigger issues that would more substantially change the calendar. And that's something I would definitely be in favor of, because whether we change it or not, I think it's important to look at them and to consider them, and if it would be beneficial, if it would be detrimental, what the outcome would be. And so to your point, Nancy, the reason the calendar didn't change much is because it can't. I mean, there's very, very tight, I mean, it can, but to do it would be a big change. We didn't feel that that was something we wanted to tackle at this particular moment. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity to some of the questions you guys were asking.
Pam, you wanted to add something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, the history of professional development, and I'm sure the parent probably doesn't care much about professional development, but everybody, like all 15,000 families, or however many families we have, less than that, 10,000 families, whatever, they all have their schedules, right? And they all have their preferences. But over the decade I've been on the board, we've done the early release Wednesday, which was super unpopular with the community because, we had kids running around the community.
Wednesdays.
So that's why we flipped it to the late start Wednesday. And then we also tried just full on Wednesdays. So this is our third kind of shot at it, if I will. So I understand his concern, but it's been really worked on over the years, and everything's been tried. Not everything, but really worked diligently to try to make it the best for both the teachers and the families. And there is no perfect. It's kind of like the school start date. There's no perfect answer for that, but
Okay, we'll see this again in a couple weeks for approval.
Thank you, board.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, 4.6. This is the New Vision Charter School Renewal Extension Update. I'm not sure who's coming up to join us.
looks like it's Gordon.
Oh, it is Gordon. It's Gordon. I didn't know.
I'd like to take the circuitous route to
Thank you, guys.
Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board, I'm Gordon Jones, Chief Financial Officer for the district. This item that is before you, just a bit of background. The board will be aware, or is aware, that there are 2 charter schools that are authorized by the district for operation within TSD. Both of those charter schools have existing 5-year charter renewals that are in place. It just so happens that both of those expire at the end of the 23-24 school year, or fiscal year, one and the same. So the last renewal period that took place, the renewals did not take place in the same year. There was one Loveland Classical that was done the year before, and then New Vision the year after. The reason for that is, as a bit of background, is that Loveland Classical was entertaining going to the market with bonds to support the construction of their addition. And rather to get a more favorable rating, to show stability, to show the confidence of the district behind that, rather than having a 1-year renewal that they could show at that time, they requested to do an early renewal 1 year sooner. So it didn't change the 5-year plan that they had in place. It just made their renewal a year earlier, so then they had a 6-year, in essence, renewal in place. So there was some confusion of which, when each of those charters expire. I've looked through all the contracts, legal has looked through all the contracts. They are both coterminous at the end of this year. So in understanding that and the work that's involved by staff and the charter schools both, it's a fairly extensive process to analyze and review the charters. There was a discussion with New Vision of extending their current contract, so by 1 year, and therefore having the renewals, one, Loveland Classical being at the end of this year, and New Vision at the end of next year. It's almost the reverse of what happened before when Loveland Classical requested a 1 year earlier. This would be extending New Vision to 1 year later. So they would essentially have a 6-year agreement, and then we would undergo the renewal process with them at the end of 24-25 school year. The attached document that was here is the resolution, draft resolution that's been prepared by legal. I think the most important thing is one sentence on the last page of that, under item C. I believe it's C, yes. In all other respects, the contract remains unchanged. All it's doing is extending by 1 year. So that is the request. This resolution has been shared with New Vision staff as well, that they are planning on addressing with their board at, I believe, the December 11th meeting.
All right, I don't have any questions about it. Amy, question?
No.
Alexandra?
What's, oh, I mean, it just makes sense.
No, well, I guess I sort of have a question is, so is this approved by us and approved by New Vision? Does it also need to be approved like by the state or anybody like that? Or
No, the district is the authorizer in this case, so it's just between Thompson School District and the New Vision Board.
Okay.
This board and the New Vision
Yeah,
Board.
questions? Okay. No questions.
That is a solution with no additional problems.
That we know of. Run while it's still true.
Thank you, Board.
All right.
Gordon, 4 minutes.
Woo, nice.
We have the
All right, 4.7, the sale of Monroe Elementary School update. Hi.
Yes, good evening, Madam President, Board of Education, Dr. Schaefer, Todd Piconi, Chief Operations Officer. Tonight, provide an update to the board on the transaction and the next steps for the Monroe Elementary School. So, to be transparent with our resources, I want to let the board and community know where we're at and then our next steps. So, it's a riveting presentation, that is it. But really what I wanted to do was update two things. One is the previous buyer did terminate their contract about a week ago. So we did receive their $25,000 earnest money for the termination. So that contract is terminated. As the day passed today, we did receive another offer on the facility. So at this point we can't disclose who, because we're going to start the contract negotiations. So the purpose of tonight is just to update the board that we received that offer. We will ask the board in the next meeting to approve a resolution similar to the process we've done before. The resolution will be drafted by our legal counsel to say we will enter into contract with and negotiate with the seller, and then we'll work through all the aspects of the new contract. So, yeah, so two things. One, just to provide an update of where we're at from the previous buyer. And then the news that we did receive a letter of intent today, which we are starting to work through.
Perfect. Yay.
And as we head into questions, a reminder that it's confidential in terms of at this time we do no disclosure of who the potential offer is from.
Questions? Stu?
No.
Alexandra? No? Okay, thank you,
Great.
Todd. Might as well stay put, because I think you're
3
on
minutes.
next.
Is that 3 minutes?
I don't even think it was that. About one.
Perfect.
All right, 4.8, this is the State of Colorado grant agreement for the youth shelter. Todd?
All right, thank you again. Again, in alignment with our Strive 2025, to show our use of resources. A little background information is we were awarded the grant a few months ago now from the Department of Local Affairs, which also works with the Division of Housing. So we received that grant for right at $3.7 million. Since then, well, let me stop there. So we received the grant for $3.7 million. That grant is defined for design, construction, and furniture for the facility. So the next step, and the next slide here, is our contracting process. So we've been working with legal, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, and Department of Housing. So it's a pretty complex contract that's attached. So we can start at page 1 and go through 80 if you'd like. But
We got the minutes back.
right, yes, true. I've got 2 more. But what, as we reviewed it with our legal counsel, what the suggestion was is really to highlight the type of contract and just the different pieces of it. So there's 3 pieces of this agreement. So there's the actual grant agreement is the first part of the contract. There's Exhibit A, which defines the statement of work, so basically what we're obligated to do, and then Exhibit J. So when we look at the first part of the contract, the grant agreement, so that defines payment process. It really confirms that first bullet point, the district has no out-of-pocket expense. So there's different pieces of the contract that defines, we have the building cost, and that number shows up in different areas, but it does define that we don't have out-of-pocket expense for this grant. The obligation of contract administration, so it goes through the legal pieces of what really we're obligated to do underneath this contract. Exhibit A, it really defines the deliverables. So a couple of those were still in negotiation because it defines the exact dates. So we're working through dates. We're working through some of those deliverables that is in the table. Process for approving budget. So a little different than before. They actually have, if we were to change the budget, there's a process in there where we have to get approval. So for example, if construction goes over by 5%, we want to move some dollars from design and furniture to construction. They need to go through a process with us to approve that. So it's just more of a defined process than typical, like a BEST grant or other grants we've gone through before. And then there is some accounting requirements. So just like any grant, there's always requirements, but there's a defined process for what we have to go through. And then a reporting process too, because there's a little more reporting to this. They make you work for your money. There's a little more reporting to this than a typical grant. So that's the highlights in Exhibit A. Exhibit J is a little more of the meat behind it. So this really defines the covenant of the agreement. So what this is saying is that we agreed to, for the next 30 years, deed the building or put a piece of language on the deed of the property that says we'll only use it for a youth shelter, ages 15 to 20. So legally, as we were going through this, legally the board can do that. We've been talking to our legal counsel because we've had open discussion and we've reviewed this several times. Our attorney was not worried about the actual process of doing it, but it's just an awareness because that is a commitment. So that was really the meat behind Exhibit J and what is included there. The only piece of language we're working through now is there is some language in there that says if saying there's a depreciation on the money that we borrowed or they're giving us. So in 20 years, it's only worth $1 million. If we paid that $1 million back, does the covenant go away? Right now, it's not clear. So the state attorneys and our attorneys are finalizing that last piece. We think it's ultimately fair that if we were to pay that obligation off, then we get the building back in full. Besides that, that was the only legal piece that was left in negotiation, I'll say. The rest of it, it's considered a black law. Our attorney said this is a basically a take it or leave it contract under a black law dictionary. So it, because it's a federal contract based through our state legislation, that it is pretty tight and standard. And that's why there is so many pages to it, and you'll see there's I think 3 pages of just different laws that are referenced within it. So there's a lot of reading material there, but that is the highlights behind 3 sections of that contract. So next time we'll bring forward the actual contract with a couple of those minor adjustments for the board to approve and hopefully move forward with. Any questions?
I think we start with Dawn this time.
Okay, so in that scope, the Exhibit J piece, that's the minimum, right? So so we can do more than that.
We could,
I'm not saying we have to right now, don't
Oh, yeah.
like lose it, cause I know you have a full plate. But I'm just saying that like additional ages or something like that, we must include those ages, we must run it as a youth shelter. But like we could potentially look at doing more someday.
correct, that's just the scope we agreed to with the grant, yes. So that's the minimum requirement that we've agreed to, yes.
No extra work yet,
No,
yet.
yeah.
Stu? Nancy?
I just want to make sure I understand Exhibit J. So they're saying, the Matthews House, or whoever, that they want this restrictive covenant for 30 years to ensure that all this work and everything that they're doing, that this is what.
No, it's actually the state.
It's
It's
the state,
required,
it's the
yeah.
grants.
So the state will actually put a language within our deed that we, of the property, stating that it has a restriction that this property can only be used for this. So for example, if we were to go to someone who's trying to sell it in 20 years from now, they pull the deed and the title up and it would say, oh, well, you can't sell it unless you're using it for this. So the state puts that restriction on the property.
Okay, now it makes sense, okay. And then on the construction, the potential for cost overruns, how, because if this is all being funded by grants, what happens if there is, like where does that money come from?
So within the 3.7, we've got a little bit of contingency in that to cover some of that. We're also about half the way done with design, and we're costing at the same time. So we have cost models at the same time, and we're pretty close. I mean, so going into it, we already know that we're comfortable with the budget we have. The other opportunity we have is there's other donors that have said, you know, if you need money for beds, if you need money for this, we can help that way. So there is some flexibility within the dollars. You know, if for example the construction went over by 100,000, you know, we'd ask to shift some from the fixtures into that budget, and then we and the Matthews House are talking to donors about covering those costs as the last resort.
Are you building in any inflation rate factor?
We do have some of that in there. Within that number, well, we hope to start within 6 months, so we just have about 3 to 4%.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not, it's an amount, yes, but because we're not projected out years,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Amy?
Thanks.
Alexandra?
I don't know if it's a question as much as just the fact that covenant of it being used only for a youth shelter from here to eternity is a little concerning to me. Just because, I mean, who knows, you know, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, what, that, I don't know, that seems very restrictive. So I'd be interested to hear it. I mean, it sounds like the lawyers are looking into that, but I'd be interested to learn the outcome of that.
Yeah, no, we will, and it's not uncommon. So actually, Monroe Elementary, it had a 45-year covenant on it, and so it just expired. You know, but so if we were to try to sell Monroe, say 15 years ago, we actually would not have been able to because the covenant was put on it. So it's common with these type of grants. Head Start grant, for example, it's the same process. But yeah, it's definitely something to talk about awareness. That's what we're agreeing to.
Yeah.
It's getting closer every day, so it's really exciting to see.
It is.
The progress, thank you.
I appreciate the summary into the full packet.
Tyler, covenant was for how many years? 15 to 20?
30.
30, okay. Well, then that makes me feel better. I thought, the impression I got was that it was forever.
Oh, no, 30 years.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Then that I'm okay with.
All right. Thank you, Todd.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. 4.9, this is our standard action consent items that will be on our next board packet, knowing there will be more, I'm sure. Could be donations, whatever. We never know quite how many there will be at this point. And then we're at the CASB update. Do we want to do this right now or take it a little break? Anybody need to get up? Then I'll just get up and walk around if I need to. I've been sitting a long time. So Stu, let's go ahead then. Do your legislative update for us.
All right. So the introduction to my legislative update is not what it would have been like 2 hours ago when I sat down here and opened my email, there was an email from Matt Cook, who's one of the top folks at CASB, saying that Governor Polis released his budget today. And in his budget, he's calling for the complete buy down of the budget stabilization factor. That was just announced today. Of course, that doesn't mean that it will happen, but it's exciting that the governor is proposing that. The legislature did a lot to help school districts in the last legislative session. I'm going to say, Gordon, you can help me on this. I think the state buy down was 180 million. Does that sound right? I didn't have time to go back and look at my notes because I just saw it here.
I believe that is either 184 or 134 million, I think, from the state level. So
okay.
This language was written into the school finance bill in the 23 session as
okay.
well as part of the legislation. So that was the intent, but it's good to have that.
So he's actually announced that. So were that to come to fruition and reality, that would be really exciting for all the school districts in Colorado. So if you're looking at your report, you'll see that the report I have for you is not really a legislative report because there is no legislation that's actually in the works right now. But I thought I'd give you just a real quick overview of what the CASB convention will look like in regard to different kinds of legislation that will be brought forth that's CASB related. You can see there will be 9 standing resolutions that address the topics that I indicated in the report that I filed with Laura Lee, 3 federal standing resolutions. The standing resolutions are aimed at the state level. The federal standing resolutions obviously are aimed at the congressional level. They tend to roll over from year to year. Other resolutions fall into 2 categories. They're either part of the consent agenda or they are part of the non-consent agenda that will be considered at the CASB convention. Both might be discussed. The difference between the two is that the consent agenda items received unanimous support at the delegate assembly, and I've given you 3 examples there from a total of 13 that are actually going to be part of the consent agenda. And then the non-consent agenda were ones that did not receive unanimous support. They may be discussed, they may be brought up, or they may not be. They're more controversial in nature. In addition to the couple that I provided you with there, some other things, 5 other general categories of the legislative resolutions were changes in state assessment, additions to the teacher mentoring program, some changes to BEST grants, some suggested legislation regarding a minimum wage for teachers, and then also changes to CORA. And then the last part of what you'll see are some significant changes to bylaws themselves, and that those of course directly affect just CASB, whereas the other things could ultimately become legislation. So that's just kind of a summary for the board who will be going to the Broadmoor on December 6th, 7th, and 8th, I think, or 7th, 8th, and 9th, one or the other. It's kind of an overview of what the board is likely to see.
By the way, I did all the voting for the delegates assembly in November. I could just sit at home and have my leg up and iced and.
Yeah, this is the first time that
And they offered it.
could be done remotely.
Yeah. So I was
Always
able to do
before
it
they
for us.
required in person.
Yeah, so it's fine. And we do want somebody in person at the one in, at the Broadmoor. So if you're dying to do it, let us know, or Stu, or Don, or I can do it. It's just, you think about it.
Well, part of this will depend on what happens on November
Oh.
7th.
Oh, dang. Yeah, okay, never mind. Just kind of erase that.
But you're right, Barb, you're right, there should be a delegate.
We need a delegate there.
Somebody
Yeah.
should be present for that
Yeah,
business,
okay.
yes.
My mistake, you guys, I'm so sorry. All right, do we need to get up? I needed to get moved, but does anybody else need to get up, or are we okay to go on? We're good? All right, we're gonna move into our study session discussion items. And tonight's, because we requested through our different tally sheets with our retreat, that we wanted some more information on the curriculum materials implementation update, and I assume that would be the math and the language arts. Yes. So, turning it over, back over to
Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board, we are going to go over an update of the 2 adoptions that you all approved last year. Obviously, it supports all of the areas of Portrait of a Graduate as we think about all of those 5 areas. And the same with the connection to Strive 25, looking at these 4 areas as well. So I'm going to give everybody a moment to review. I believe this was in your adoption meeting last year. This is what we consider a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which you're going to hear a little bit about. So I'll give you a few seconds just to read that definition. So as you all approved an adoption for math and language arts, really our goal is to have an equal opportunity for each student in Thompson to access the exact same curriculum across the board. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that is so important and making sure that we provide those experiences for all students in Thompson, 6th through 9th for language arts, and then K through 5 for Envision. So, you're going to see this structure as we go through our presentation, looking at the materials, the implementation, the training. Just something I want to make sure I point out is that ReadyGen and my perspectives, oops, sorry, I'm on Envision. We'll get to that part soon. But as we look at Envision for math, we will go through exactly what we're seeing in our schools currently. So materials supports. All of the teachers, they received their materials last spring and had all summer to work through all of their teacher workbooks. And then students ended up receiving, obviously, their student workbook this fall at the start of August. Something we're really excited about is making sure that as we get into our training, we definitely included GT, ELD, ESS, interventionists, coaches, and principals on our 11 hours of professional development. So if you remember from last year, we did some asynchronous PD with the group and the publisher for Envision, and wanted to make sure that teachers over the summer had the opportunity to take part in an 8-hour training. And then this year during TENS week, we provided a 1-hour session to just kind of review everything and make sure they were really fresh with going into the school year.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What assurance do we have that people participated for the 8-hour one? Do we know they did, or is there documentation of it?
There is.
Okay.
And I actually have been emailing some of our teachers who didn't participate because they may have missed the email.
Okay.
Whether they were new, they had a name change. I actually was in contact with them this weekend. We actually have very, very few teachers. When I think of numbers as an entire system, we probably have less than about 10 teachers who did not complete the training.
Good. Okay.
Very, very impressive. And we have sent, starting last year, the emails of participation, and so I'm very pleased with actually our participation
I'm sorry
rates.
to interrupt your flow.
And no, that's great.
But I was curious.
Yeah, so I have emailed everybody and received 3 certificates actually just today that they have completed training. So,
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that when I give you those numbers, that's actually math and language arts.
Okay.
That's system.
Okay.
So it's impressive, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about our curriculum and learning team under our learning services umbrella, we really wanted to make sure that we're supporting teachers with this new adoption. And so when we think about any time we adopt anything, we really want to make sure they're connected through our Google Classroom. We're doing a newsletter to every single elementary teacher weekly. We're providing tips and tricks that people have figured out and learned so we can share those resources amongst our staff. And then we're also partnering with All Learners Network, and I will refer to them as ALN. So ALN has provided 2 full days of trainings with our teachers. They come here and it has been some of the best training that teachers are really learning how to teach math. Some elementary teachers have really stretched their thinking in the way we teach math, and so ALN is really supporting the pedagogy of math in the curriculum. And so they are using Envision, but really adding in that layer of how do you facilitate great conceptual learning with math. And so then we also provided training for all of our coaches and our administrators with ALN. And then they have been here for half-day training with all of our elementary and the 3 K-8s in person, either modeling lessons, modeling planning. They have even given feedback to our teachers if the teachers took a risk and said, I want to teach a lesson, give me feedback. And they're actually back here next week doing the exact same thing. So they will have that opportunity 3 different times this year to work with ALN in person for the coaching side. So as we look at usage, classrooms, the intent with the program is really a blended program. So they have the student workbooks, they also have the online piece. And we've also developed our scope and sequence that align to our school calendar to make sure teachers know if they're on pace. Again, when something is new, their biggest concern is around pacing because it is new to students, the language is new. And when I think about those gaps, the gap is definitely not with the structure or the standards, it's really an academic vocabulary. And so what Envision would call a launch text, which they've got the short stories with math problems, they still call it a launch. They're working through all of the same vocabulary, but of course we've got to teach our kids the vocabulary from our previous curriculum to now. And so when we look at that, that's again through both lenses. There's an online version that the students are maybe watching a video and getting some real world practice with math. And then they're also able to perform all of their written work in a student workbook as well. But it gives them plenty of space to provide their answers and really go through all of the process or show their mathematical thinking. So as we look at how we're supporting continuing, we do have ALN here and they're going to come back in January. Our curriculum and learning team is out in the buildings really supporting teachers. We are working with administrators again through tips and tricks. We are sending out those weekly memos to teachers, but more importantly, we're really working through those instructional coaches and administrators on this is what great math pedagogy looks like. And if teachers need support, they just fill out a Google form and then we go and support them in their classroom. So our CLT crew has been in the buildings and it's definitely been a great shift for our staff to have that support because if they're going to take a risk, we need to be right along with them doing that. So we'll switch to my perspectives. Same format, materials support, same kind of structure. So all of our materials were delivered in May of 2023 and they're in the hands of students and teachers. And as we look at implementation training, the exact same training that we did for elementary, we did the 11 hours for language arts as well. We really did stress the, again, the GT, ELD, ESS teachers and coaches and administrators being a part of this training, because if we're holding interventions, they need to be using the exact same materials that our teachers are using to support that continuity between an intervention class or a GT class and their regular classes. So very excited that they participated as well. And we're seeing it in schools, so it's been wonderful. So as we look at professional learning, Robin is our ELA specialist, and so we have been in every school providing similar support like we did for math. We have a Google Classroom where people are sharing already things that they've learned about the online system. We do a newsletter each week, and we are working through all of, for secondary, the assistant principals, our deans, and our principals on all of the components to My Perspectives. As I mentioned earlier, but it was for language arts, My Perspectives is actually the exact same publisher as ReadyGen, and so kids are already used to that academic language, and that same thematic unit, just like we do in elementary, is very similar to the secondary piece. We also, through the adoption, approved funds for 10 through 12 grade language arts classes to choose novels, because we know that teachers really needed to have some different text. And so our ILTs, which is our instructional leaders from high school, they have been meeting monthly to determine which novel sets that they're going to purchase by school. So they brought back their lists. They were able to determine which novels would make sense for 10, 11, and 12 grade courses. And those have been by site. They've been purchased and ordered and delivered based on if we had their order. Just similar to Envision, My Perspectives is in print and digital resources. When you go through the classrooms, which I'm sure you've seen, their student workbooks, students are able to annotate and take notes and really closely read with the story in front of them or the text. And it's been really exciting to see all of the components that we have with My Perspectives tied in for language arts for our students. So what does ongoing support look like for language arts? Yesterday we did a deep dive for 4 hours on how to utilize the best parts of My Perspectives with some of our coaches and our APs. We're going to do it next with principals and then talk about what that looks like for teachers, because we're using the data from My Perspectives to run an administrator, an ILT, and then a curriculum coordinator PLC with the students' work. And so we're doing all of this work to model off of our solution tree PLCs with administrators and our leaders of our district that meet monthly to really know what the state of our success is, but really talk about how do we support our students in their progression of learning. We're doing a monthly newsletter to all of the language arts teachers, and then we're really diving into ongoing visits. Each of the secondary schools will have Robin and I out at least once a month to offer support, see the usage, and more importantly, support our teachers with using My Perspectives. So what's being trialed right now? So we have middle school science is piloting currently, and then we also have world language for French and Spanish at the middle and high school level. They have not done an adoption for a very long time, and we're really excited about those too.
Wow.
We've done a lot.
Yes, yeah. All right. Let's check with questions. We think we start with Stu.
Okay. A comment, then a short question, and then one that I think maybe you're going to need to elaborate on. The level of support for teachers in both Envision and My Perspectives is awesome. That's the only word that's coming to my mind. With rolling out a new curriculum and actually providing the level of support in so many different ways. I've talked with a couple of teachers. They're impressed. They're appreciative. So I don't think there's anything else I can say about how pleased I am with the level of support. Is ALN part of Envision, or is it a separate company that you're using to carry the curriculum forward?
The second one.
The second?
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, knowing that there's often unhappiness or dissatisfaction with any new adoption, and I'm talking now about both Envision and My Perspectives, what are the major issues that you're hearing right now for each of these new adoptions? And what is your leadership team, or what's the administrative team doing to address them?
I think if we call it unhappiness, change is hard. And so I think that is the biggest thing we're noticing right now is trying anything new is difficult for teachers. And so I would say that's our number one piece right now. And what we're doing to support them is going back to both of the curricular materials and really diving in and saying, what can we do to support? And we're also offering a ton of grace with sometimes you just gotta try it before you know how it's gonna work. Like I mentioned earlier, pacing I would say is probably our biggest thing that they're noticing right now is how deep both of these curriculums go versus let's just keep trucking along and going through it faster. And so I would say those are the two things we're hearing right now.
All right.
Stu, if I could extend on that
Of
as well,
course.
that was a really good answer. We're 3 months into the new, my perspectives, the new curricula, and teacher feedback is really important to us.
Yep.
In order to provide feedback with fidelity, you have to use it with fidelity so that you can provide informed feedback. And so we are very open, and quite honestly, we want feedback from our teachers in terms of the users of the material. We also want to hear from our students as well. The other thing we know is that our teachers are very talented. And so while we have our primary curriculum, we expect teachers to use their art and craft as well. Teachers are encouraged to supplement or support as necessary. While the curriculum materials are the primary vehicle, there are ways to support and supplement, and we would fully expect that.
All right. Thank
Can
you.
I add on to that?
appreciate hearing that.
When I think about these two adoptions, that's really the what we teach. The how they teach is where that teacher magic comes into play. We actually met with a teacher today and we were talking about a unit and we dove into a 7th grade, I believe it's Starry Nights. There were 56 opportunities for the kids to write within that unit, and the teacher was blown away saying, I can't create a unit with 56 different opportunities to write. And so I think when they start to use it and they start to say, okay, I can now add my teacher finesse to the unit, they really are starting to, I think, have a different opinion of what my perspectives can offer.
Just one last comment. Thank you for incorporating answers to the questions that I sent you into your presentation.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Nancy?
So I had already heard from a couple different teachers about this ALN. And so then hearing your presentation tonight helps me, because I remember when the curriculum was presented, the cost of 1.7, it was like, oh, it includes the PD. And then when I saw the budget and I saw it increase that large amount, now it makes sense because I can tie it back to the ALN, the number. And so from everything I've heard from you and other teachers, it sounds like it's a really good investment. My other question is, for the math, and you also brought it up when you said that the kids are having to learn a new vocabulary. So aside from the teachers, how are the students who maybe started in 2nd grade with a curriculum and now they're in 4th grade or 5th grade and they have this whole new one that has all this new vocabulary? What's their adjustment look like?
So they are doing great. It's what we would call kind of code switching. Just like we have multiple ways to say we add and do subtraction, like add has summed all together. We're doing the same thing in bridging what we used to use. That's what the new term would be in Envision. So what they would call a solve and share used to just be called like an addition and basically solve it. But we call it a solve and share, and it's a process they follow. So we're using kind of both languages to bridge that gap for this year, so they're starting to understand what we would call the new terms. But math, language is definitely similar across the board. That's pretty concrete. It's just the way they're solving it is new to them.
The routines
The
and the
routines,
rituals.
thank you. Yeah.
And then I was curious about the science. So, because you never hear people talk about science curriculum. So how this curriculum that sounds like we're trialing, when might we make that decision or start presenting it to the board and learn the cost, and what makes it time now to look at this versus what's in the books that we're currently using?
So we'll come back to the board after we've trialed 2 different curriculums. One is through what is Discovery Ed, and the other one is HMH. And so we're in the current pilot right now for Discovery. HMH, we are starting December 9th. And then similar to the previous adoptions, we'll bring that, I believe it was April of last year, so it'll be around the same timeline.
Is the current one, is it really outdated, or, I mean, how long have we had it?
Probably like 8 years, a lot
time.
more.
Yeah.
And there's and that would be something we could certainly share with you at that presentation, is just like the timelines for curriculum adoptions, about how long we let each of them go before it's like, okay, they're outdated, we need to see if there's an either updated version or should we continue with the same one.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Amy?
Stu asked my questions.
Alexandra?
No questions, just, once again, the forward movement is phenomenal, and the layers of support, as Stu mentioned, is just really, this is outstanding.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dawn?
2 things. One is, and I realize this is asking you something that I should have asked before now, so if you need to come back to us with it, please do, just say that. But I'm wondering where we have gaps where we don't have any district-wide curriculum. So, you know, is there ages or classes that we're teaching where we don't have a district-wide and we are really just relying on individual teachers to have their own content? And that's why I think I might need to give you more time. Okay, cool. Wanted to say that right away. And then the other thing, we just heard from people, and it's definitely not new to any of us, but it was like a reminder to go along with all this great work, is that it's like integration is also the challenge. So to go along with change, it's also just how many changes are we dealing with, and there's a pretty high amount, because it's not just curriculum, it's all sorts of things. And so I'm also just interested in anywhere that we can be more like efficient with our integration. And I think you had some examples of it, but I just want to like share that feedback since we just heard it, to say, you know, anytime that we're adding stuff where people already are, then it's not new and different, it's cohesive. And so putting it in the newsletter is one example of like good thinking, because then it's not separate, it's complementary. And so just want to share that the volume of change is still overwhelming, in case anyone hadn't been aware of that or felt it their own self lately. And so anytime we can minimize that, it helps. For letting me share that.
If I may, I'll give you an example of something that's happening that follows those lines right now, is this ALN network that we have working with our elementary math has been so successful and so well received that we just had a day today. We said, hey, since you're in town working with our elementary, could you please work with our secondary teachers, because we're hearing great things about that. And they came together, and throughout the day I checked in to find out how things were going, and it was wonderful. So to be able to capitalize on something we're already doing somewhere else in the system, because it is more cost efficient to have them just, hey, tack on another day with us. We'd love to be able to do more of that, so thanks for bringing that up.
Anything else? Thank you very much. We were
welcome.
curious about what was going on.
Yeah.
And so appreciate
Very
it. Yeah. All right, thank you. Just a second, I lost my agenda. I forgot, I wasn't gonna get up and just walk out, was I?
Just adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Close, you could.
Are there future topics for board consideration? Or topics, actually?
Future board will have to decide who's
Oh, that's
voting
right.
academy.
All right, I'm gonna just close this meeting. Meeting is adjourned.